In Carl Jung's theory of the psyche, the shadow contains everything we find unacceptable about ourselves. Primitive impulses, socially forbidden desires, traits we despise in others because we can't face them in ourselves. In a healthy psyche, the shadow exists alongside other structures. The ego can observe it. The persona can contain it socially. Connection to the self can integrate it into wholeness. But what if someone had access only to the shadow? What if every rejected, repressed, denied aspect of humanity was all they could experience, with no balancing structures to process it? This is Derek, a man drowning in his own psychological darkness. And his existence is a glimpse into hell. Derek opens his eyes at 6:30 on a Tuesday morning, and the voice begins immediately. Not a voice he hears externally, but the constant internal commentary that fills every waking moment. You're worthless. You're a failure. Everyone would be better off if you didn't exist. This isn't occasional negative self-talk that healthy people experience and can dismiss. This is the only voice Derek has access to, because Derek has only his shadow with no ego to observe it, no persona to contain it, no connection to any balancing psychological structure. Watch him lie in bed for 20 minutes before he can force himself up. The shadow is broadcasting every failure, every inadequacy, every shameful moment he's ever experienced. A person with an integrated psyche might have these thoughts occasionally, but could counter them with perspective, with self-compassion, with the ego's capacity to say, that's just one part of me, not the whole truth. Derek has no such capacity. The shadow's assessment is his only reality. He finally gets up and looks in the mirror, and what he sees there isn't a neutral reflection. He sees a monster. Every physical flaw is magnified. Every imperfection becomes proof of his fundamental unworthiness. The shadow contains all the self-hatred he's accumulated over decades, and with no ego to provide balanced perspective, that hatred is the only lens through which he can view himself. Derek tries to choose clothing for work, but even this simple task becomes torture. He puts on a shirt, and the shadow immediately provides commentary. You look pathetic. Everyone will see what a loser you are. Why do you even bother? He changes shirts. Same commentary. The shadow isn't critiquing his fashion choices. It's expressing the totality of his self-loathing through whatever immediate context is available. Researchers studying depression and self-concept would recognize elements of what Derek experiences. But this goes deeper than clinical depression. Derek doesn't have a depressed ego that might respond to cognitive behavioral therapy or medication. He has no ego at all. Just the shadow. That repository of everything rejected and denied, operating without any structure to integrate or balance it. He's not depressed. He's possessed. Derek arrives at his office and immediately the shadow begins its assessment of everyone around him. His coworker Janet smiles and says good morning. Derek's perception of this interaction is filtered entirely through the shadow's lens of projection. He doesn't see a friendly greeting. He sees mockery. Obviously she's being sarcastic. Obviously she's making fun of him. The shadow contains Derek's own capacity for cruelty and mockery, and with no ego to recognize this as projection, he experiences it as external reality. In the morning meeting, Derek's colleague Tom presents an idea. Derek's shadow immediately generates a visceral reaction of contempt and disgust. What an idiot. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. He's pathetic. These aren't conscious thoughts Derek is choosing to have. They're the automatic output of a shadow operating without any moderating structure. Jung called the shadow a repository of rejected traits, and Derek's shadow contains decades of accumulated judgment, criticism, and contempt that he's denied in himself. Watch what happens when Derek's boss asks him to collaborate with Sarah on a project. Derek immediately feels threatened, hostile, suspicious. Why is his boss pairing him with Sarah? Is this a setup? Are they trying to make him look bad? The shadow contains primitive survival instincts and paranoid interpretations, and without an ego to reality test these perceptions or a persona to navigate them socially, Derek experiences pure paranoia as objective truth. Tom approaches Derek after the meeting to discuss the project. Tom is friendly, collegial, trying to establish positive working rapport, but Derek can only perceive threat. He's scanning Tom's face for signs of contempt, listening to his words for hidden insults, interpreting every gesture as potentially aggressive. Tom mentions he's excited about the collaboration, and Derek hears this as sarcastic mockery. Tom suggests they grab coffee to discuss ideas, and Derek interprets this as a power play or a trap. Psychologists studying projection mechanisms would recognize what's happening. Derek's shadow contains his own aggression, his own capacity for manipulation, his own hostile impulses. With no ego to recognize these as internal experiences, he projects them outward onto everyone around him. The result is a workplace where Derek experiences everyone as an enemy, every interaction as a threat, every relationship as fundamentally hostile. By lunch, Derek has alienated Tom completely. Derek's responses have been curt, suspicious, occasionally openly hostile. Tom, confused and hurt by Derek's inexplicable antagonism, decides to request a different project partner. When this happens, Derek's shadow immediately interprets it as confirmation. See, he was against you all along. Everyone's against you. You were right to be suspicious. The paranoia feeds itself in an endless loop.